Hi, I'm Richard Felder, Professor Emeritus of Chemical Engineering at North Carolina State University. I have an opinion piece in the latest issue of Advances in Engineering Education that I'd like to tell you something about. First, what are learning styles? If you ask that question of 10 different people who use learning styles, you're probably going to get about 9 different answers. To me, they're simply patterns of student attitudes, behaviors, and preferences for one type of teaching over another. For example, some students really love mathematical analysis, abstract theories, that sort of thing. They get bored with repetitive calculations and all of the details that you have to attend to when you're doing lab experiments. And if they're taking courses that have too much of that stuff, they get grumpy about it. Other students have a much different attitude toward teaching. They like hands-on experience. They're very comfortable in laboratories, and real-world applications of theories are really important to them. And they're not fond at all of abstract theories and mathematical analysis, and in courses that have a lot of those things, they're likely to complain about it. I've just described two opposing categories of one dimension of learning styles. The first group I described are the intuitive learners, the ones who like the abstract theories and mathematics. The others, the real-world types who like practical applications of things and hands-on work, are the sensing learners. So you have the intuitors and you have the sensors. Those are not either-or preferences. You're either this or that, period, end of story. But they're preferences that may be mild, moderate, or strong in different students, and they vary from one situation to another. They're not fixed once and for all. My interest in learning styles started many years ago when I started reading about them, and I found that some of the learning style patterns that these different models were describing fit me perfectly. And others came much closer to fitting many of my students who were not so much like me. Once I realized that, I saw that my courses, the courses I was teaching, were strongly tilted in favor of the intuitors. I always loved math, and in my research, I did a lot of mathematical modeling of chemical processes, and I crammed as much of those things into my courses as I could. And the intuitors loved it. They were very happy. They generally got good grades in my courses, and I generally got good student ratings at the end of the semester. The sensors, not so much. In 1988, I co-developed a model of learning styles that I thought were particularly suitable for my engineering students. And a couple of years later, I developed an instrument to measure students' preferences on the 4 dimensions of my model. That was called the Index of Learning Styles, and it kind of went viral. Shortly after I developed it, it started getting upwards of 100,000 hits a year. A couple of years, it went over 1 million. Studies were done to validate it and were published. Translations of it were done into about a dozen different languages, and research using the Index of Learning Styles started going on all over the world. I'm not patting myself on the back when I'm telling you about those things. I simply want to make the point that learning styles have achieved widespread recognition and use in education, and I just have one model. There are many others floating around out there. Teachers and millions of users have accessed the Index of Learning Styles and some of those other instruments and different models. And if that were the happy ending of the learning style story, it would be great, but there would be no need for the paper in the latest issue of AEE. Unfortunately, that's not the end of the story. In recent years, some academic psychologists, including some of the top cognitive scientists in the world, have come out with an extraordinarily hostile attitude toward learning styles. And every year, 1 or 2 of them publish an article debunking learning styles, giving them terms like folklore, neuromyths, and in one particularly colorful instance, Somebody called them snake oil. The argument that the debunkers have goes like this. They say learning style proponents all believe that to improve your students' learning, you should match your teaching to each one of their individual learning styles. That's called the meshing hypothesis. Match teaching to learning styles and you'll improve learning. And the debunkers go on to say there is no research evidence to support that hypothesis, and therefore learning styles are invalid and should never be used for instructional design. Some of them go on to say that teachers who have used learning styles have harmed their students. There's no evidence offered to document that claim, but nevertheless, it's offered. And they finally conclude that anyone who believes in learning styles, let alone uses them to design instruction, is misguided or just downright gullible. There is good news for the debunkers. Most proponents of learning styles don't believe the meshing hypothesis. In fact, many of them, including me, explicitly reject the meshing hypothesis. They don't say you should try to match your teaching to your students' learning styles. They say that's a really bad idea and you shouldn't do it, among other reasons because it's impossible to do that if you have more than about 2 students in a class. The point of learning styles is not matching to students' preferences, but it's to achieve balance. It's to avoid overloading your teaching in a way that prefers heavily one style over its opposite. A good learning styles model provides you with a really good, simple basis for designing that balanced instruction. And there are several ways that you can achieve the balance. You balance in whatever course you're teaching theory and applications. You balance presentation of information visually and verbally. You balance student activity with student reflection on what they've been taught, and so forth. If you can succeed in doing that, then you end up using teaching techniques that are perfectly compatible with standard references on pedagogy and with cognitive science. Over the years, the debunkers' efforts to discredit learning styles have been ineffective. They just simply haven't succeeded. And many of the debunkers bemoan the fact that despite their frequent criticism, educators still believe in learning styles, and all over the world they're making extensive use of learning styles to improve their teaching. However, the debunkers have undoubtedly succeeded in dissuading some educators from making use of learning styles. I have personally enjoyed a great deal of success in improving my teaching, making use of learning styles. So have many of my colleagues. And that motivated me to write this article to try to set the record straight on the concept of learning styles. The paper answers several questions. First, what are learning styles? What are different examples of learning style preferences? And why is trying to match your teaching to students' learning styles a bad idea? 2, can you design effective instruction without making use of learning styles? The answer to that one is obviously sure. It's been done for centuries. Then the question becomes, well, if that's the case, why use learning styles? And the third question the paper answers is, can you design balanced instruction for your class if it has students with many different learning styles? And can you do it even if you don't know what their learning styles are? The answer to that question is, yes, you can. And then the question becomes, okay, how do you do that? If you're familiar with learning styles, watching what I'm saying now, my hope is that the paper will keep you from shying away from a really powerful tool for designing effective instruction. If you're new to learning styles, my hope is that you'll be motivated to check out the article and maybe look at a couple of the references cited in it and find out about learning styles, and then decide for yourself whether you think they might be useful adjuncts to your teaching. Either way, after you read the paper and 1 or 2 references, think about your teaching and whether you're providing a good balance between different learning style preferences, and are there ways that you might do even better at it? Well, thank you for listening. And by the way, I can assure you that no students were harmed in the making of this video.